Evening. Thank you to focus on Liberia, where we talk everything Liberia. Today I have two guests with me, Mr. Mabu Franklin Neal and Mr. Se Kofankpeye. They're both engineers and they're both Liberian descent. They're here to discuss with us their vision of Liberia if all things are done correctly for Liberia. For 2025, what do we envision? Where do we think Liberia should be? And what would be the best possible way to redesign or re-engineer our country? Mr. Neal, thank you.
Good evening, Heather.
And Mr. Peye, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon and good evening to everyone.
Thank you. With that said, let me start with you, Mr. Neal. Tell me what you do, or tell the community what do you do.
Right now, I serve as project quality manager for energy company. We build backup systems for electrical designs and stuff like that in the oil fields. For instance, we take a look at Liberia. We will be building the backup designs that go with the hydro and everything else. Those are the designs, the systems that actually triggers in when actual main system go down, so they're called DC systems. So these are used in the oil field and major entities that have high volume of electricity being used.
So you just give a little view of what you do, but I understand you're an electrical engineer, correct? Mechanical engineer. So what does a mechanical engineer do, in so to speak?
For me, for my part, as far as the project and designing the systems is actually assessing what the customer wants, as far as having to deal with the volume of electricity they're gonna need, what area they're gonna use it as, and where we can at best be able to help them in not having to lose the electricity when they need it. So the backup system actually kicks in, like I say, to support the main power system. So you take a city of Monrovia going down at night, this is where the DC system will actually kick in. So you got 40, 50 megawatts that needs to be supported by these DC systems. And this is where we build these systems to be able to do that, either through a battery backup or through a solar grid systems.
Thank you. So this will bring me to Mr. Sepeye. Mr. Peye, what is structural engineering?
Okay, thank you so much. I am professionally, I'm a structural engineer. I have a graduate education in structural engineering. So what does a structural engineer do? A structural engineer is an individual, first and foremost, everything that we deal with, everything that we use has some form of structure in it. Folks tend to say that it has a backbone. So a building, for instance, or a home for that matter, has a backbone. It has the walls that kind of support the building. You have the roofing of the building. So when you're in the home, you are safe. So what a structural engineer does is that we ensure that every building that is being put up, every road system that is being put up, every bridges that are being built are safe enough so that when you're driving your car over it, the car is not going to break while your car is over it, depending on the kind of load. If you have a tractor trailer with a heavy load on it, it's not in the middle of the bridge and the bridge crashes. So in a nutshell, a structural engineer ensures that every structure is safe to carry the right load.
Thank you. So that, because we're talking about Liberia today, everything on this show is about Liberia. We are the junction of where we either make us or break us, in respect to political environment, our country, and making decisions. Now, let me ask the both of you, before the war, how did we do, and after the war, how have we done, and what can we do better in respect to security, coding, and all of those things? Those are your areas. So, Mr. Neal, will you please?
In regards to as far as support systems, coding to be able to support the current grid in Liberia, I think one of the things that we have to do now is to ensure that, because of security concerns, to ensure that the system that is designed, the hydro system that is designed right now, has a backup to make sure that we do not lose that again. We understand due to unnecessary circumstances, we lost that. The walking is gone. Now leaping forward is, how do we design a city by the sea that's going to be the next generation, and putting in these backup systems. That's what we call, keep us safe in regards to that, because losing electricity in a major city is very impactful. I don't see, we've done well to be able to live without electricity for a long time. We've done very well. The team in Liberia is steadily trying to get things online, and we must commend them for what they're doing. But it's some hard work. But now the thing is getting it online, keeping it online, sustainability, maintaining that. Those are the concerns of what we have today.
Thank you, Mr. Neil. Mr. Pei, the same question for you. How have we done? How did we do before? What could we do better at this point?
I think from the Liberian perspective, we started with a well-planned out process in terms of our infrastructure. From those who I've talked to, engineers of the 70s and of the 80s have been able to ascertain that many of our buildings were built to code of that time. What I mean by code of that time is that every infrastructure, every building, every home that is built has to be built to some standard. We see where, for instance, the disasters that we have seen around us, particularly for those of us who are in the southeast, we have seen the hurricane and the devastation it have caused both in Florida and in the Caribbean. So to ensure that buildings, if they meet such disaster, they can at least recoup, or they can give the inhabitants or the human inhabitants enough time for them to be able to find a safe area. There are building codes, and those building codes are to ensure, for instance, if there's a fire, there's some specs in the building code that ensure that people are able to get out of their home in time so that they are not burned in there. So as far as Liberia is concerned, there was some code that was available during that time, but with years, those codes have to be updated. As a matter of fact, right now, most of the building codes that are being used both in the U.S. and around across the globe is the International Building Code. The most current one is the 2015, and the 2013, for those who don't have the 2015. In Liberia, because we are coming out of a war situation, it'll be a little bit difficult trying to keep track of the quality of the buildings that we put up. Our hope is that as we settle into peace, there's an opportunity for us to begin to look at our different institutions on how we can safeguard all of our infrastructure, our homes, our bridges that are being built, that some level of safety is being built in there, and the building code ensures that you have that.
Okay, so, and this one goes to the both of you. We're talking now about integrity, structural integrity, and building cooling and bridges. We're in the process of rebuilding our community or our country in regards to bridges, reservoir, electricity, all the different then. What at this point that would be your hope for the both of you? Mr. Neil, I know you work in quality also, and Mr. Pei, I know you're into structural. And you both are working for different organizations in the U.S., and this is our country. What do you think would be the best route to take at this point, due to the limited resources that is available to us, that are available to us at this point? Mr. Neil?
As far as what we need to do in regards to the building, and I would say maybe based on our city size, previously built for 300,000, now the city needs to be expanded out. The city limits need to be expanded out. As far as we have to, get people where they're safe. Having X amount of thousands of people over a design of what you actually have for 300,000 is not safe at all. Now you got maybe a 10-to-1 ratio or 20-to-1 ratio compared to when 300,000 was there. That's not a safe condition right there. So expanding our city limits up into the the Breville area, and those would kind of help open up the city for the new designs to come, because we look at our sewer system. The city gets overpopulated with water during the rainy season. You look at Rallytown Market, you have the major dump of the city goes through there, that goes through the BTC. All of those areas need to be clean, but the city needs to be flushed out when you have, water coming through from the heavy rains, the tropical rains of Liberia. So those are some of the things that those drainage are clogged because of, building and overpopulation and all of that stuff. So we have to expand the city out so we'll be able to actually see the design intent, where we have the bottlenecks at, and how we can clean up those bottlenecks. And Asay can tell you more about it as far as how the structural flow would come, based on what's happening.
Mr. Kuya, will you please?
I think we can start the process, as Mr. Neal just said, that you have Monrovia City that was originally designed for 300,000 now has to be available and be used by over 1 million people. That in itself presents a problem. But let me take a step back and try to at least give us some ideas on how we can go about trying to properly plan our cities. I've worked for various agencies for well over 25 years, and one of the things that we do is that we try to demarcate cities based on population size. If the future goal is going to be to ensure that all of Monrovia and this environment are incorporated into one city, then we have to look at the overall population of Monrovia. In this case, we say that it's well over 1 million right now. So a city of this that has a population of 1 million requires certain amenities or facilities. For instance, we need to have a sewer system. We need to have a drainage system. We need to have an electrical system. We need to have power generations. We need to have also the data system so that people are able to communicate with one another. We can start the process if the goal is to incorporate all of the areas right now as a future city of Monrovia. Then I would suggest that right now, if you go to the Ministry of Public Works and you have a property and you needed to do some work, they ask you to demarcate at least 25 feet or 30 feet as an alleyway. I will have a different approach on that. The reason being that Monrovia, as it is, majority of the population in Monrovia does not have vehicles. So we have a largely pedestrian city. So therefore, if you have a pedestrian city, then you need to provide a safe access of getting them from their homes to whatever location they're going, whether it's children going to school, whether it's teachers, is employees who are going to ministries or to different corporations to work. We need to provide them a safe passage to work. That means that we have to provide some sidewalk connectivity to someone who cannot afford a car, who cannot afford a pen, or even a keke, as it's being used in Liberia, can at least walk, as in our balance in Liberia says that to count the light pole. So at least we need to, while they are counting the light pole or they are doing all of these things, we need to provide them a safe access. That means that the typical design standard says that you need to have a 5-foot wide sidewalk for people to be able to safely walk and go past one another. And further, so therefore that means that our 25 and 30 feet have to be increased to at least 40 feet. The 40 feet ensures that at least 2 cars can pass by one another on the side street. You have 2 sidewalks on both sides so people can go past one another, and you have to provide at least some kind of safe area between the sidewalk and the main road so cars don't hit people who are trying to cross by one another. So that will be the first approach. And the next thing will be that we want to organize the different neighborhoods into a grid system. That means that we will say, okay, in a residential area, if we need maybe 200 or 300 houses in a grid, we have to provide some connectivity. We'll make sure that you have maybe a 2-lane road system to connect them, and then we'll have a neighborhood streets to also connect them. That will be one of the approaches that I would suggest for the future Liberia, in the future Monrovia, if we have to go that route. Like I said before, so let's demarcate the cities in all of Liberia. Let's say area or urban area. Urban area is where people are kind of concentrated. We call them urban area. So if you have an urban area that have at least 5,000 people, let's say we're going to call it a village or a city, then we must provide that at least we have a clinic connected with that. At least we have other facilities that people need, electrical system, water system, because those are things that are highly important to all of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Puye. Thank you, Mr. Neil. Thank you for all of you out there that are watching. We're focused on Liberia, where everything we talk about is Liberia. I do have two guests with me today, Mr. Mabu Franklin Neil and Mr. Save Kofan Puye. They're both engineers. We are redesigning Liberia for 2025. That will be the vision. We will be back. We are going on break, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. So let's see the people that help us to stay on air. Thank you for watching.
Sound kind of special. Baby, I do.
Focus on Liberia, where we talk everything Liberia. I'm your host today. Your host, Mr. Jad, is not here, so I'm sitting in for him. I do have with me two Liberian engineers, two young Liberian engineers. We're doing generational change. We call this Vision 2025 Re-Engineering Liberia. We are hoping after the election, we will look at things differently. We'll lay out our community. We'll become competitive in the world or in the global economy. So we brought some young Liberians to talk to Liberians to see where do they envision from their professional opinion and where do we hope to be 2025. And thank you for watching. Mr. Neil, let me start with you again. I'm sorry, I keep starting with you. Let's talk about the different agencies, the regulations, structures, quality. As you said before earlier, Monrovia was designed for 300,000 people. Now we have over 1 million people living there. So for me, it's like designing a house for one family of 5 and then putting, 50 or 80 other family in the house. So there would be problem. I mean, in the layman terms. Now, what do you think should happen here in respect to regulation? How can we make it livable for everyone? Which arm of the government do you think should be responsible for ensuring these coding and structural integrity and compliance or compliances?
Well, I mean, currently the Ministry of Works does the coding, but as far as how we go about distributing, as far as what a household is supposed to have, I mean, that based on the individual. But I mean, if you're in the line of you build a house for 5, maybe your cousin, your brother, everybody else come, at some time you start seeing that maybe the sewage system does not meet that requirement. You start having backup and stuff like that. So all of these are some of the things that the codes are designed to prevent for you having those type of things. So you have to expand those things outside of it, as far as going into having another house, if that's possible, or ensuring that this is just a temporary and not a permanent situation. Coding, as far as the government function who I think should be heading it, that I really can't say. I mean, that over here, the local, municipal, state takes care of that. They have a separate arm that does that, because the codes have they come with licensing. So if you're a builder and you put in to have a house, build and stuff like that, there are different licenses that you have to go through: approval for water, approval for light, approval for structure. So all of these have different levels that get approved, in the line of quality. Does it meet for this thing, for a certain capacity? Mm-hmm. On bigger structures, you got building codes where the fire marshal will come and shut you down because you're out of code, because you overpopulated. It happens in a restaurant. It happens in social gathering, as far as a club or something like that, or even we Liberians, when we have occasional things at event center, the fire or the police come and tell us we're out of code at that particular time, because our event was supposed to hold 200 people, now it's holding 500 people, and it's just not possible, and they will shut it down. So these are things that the codes prevent the hazard that can happen. In Rhode Island, correct me, a couple of years ago, because they were out of code, they had a big old fire, people couldn't escape, and so many people died. So these are the things that codes help prevent from happening. See, anything else you can say in regards to that?
As far as Liberia is concerned, where we are right now, we have had buildings, people have put up buildings and everything. But the way forward, how I look at the way forward is that right now we have the Ministry of Public Works that check all of the building plans, the land use, the zoning, and all of those. If I was to make a proposal, I would suggest that you have a different agency called maybe a building authority, and then have another one called a zoning authority. The reason why I'm suggesting those is because, number one, in the zoning authority, that you will have zoning officers and code officers who will actually go out there and ensure that areas that have been zoned as commercial, before somebody put a building in there, make sure that, for instance, if you're going to put up a shop, you need to provide adequate parking spaces for the store, so that when your customers come, they are able to safely park off of the main road into the facility of that store. We need a building authority, because with a building authority, it ensures that when somebody is putting up a commercial property, a commercial building, that it is up to code. If you design and put up, say, a supermarket, and for unforeseen reason there is fire, you need to be able to evacuate all of those folks out of that facility. The building authority will ensure that, for instance, that building is up to code, that the building in itself composed of the walls, the roof, the ceilings and everything, that they are up to code, that, for instance, the ceiling that is in the supermarket is fire resistant, so that people have a chance to survive in case there's an outbreak of fire.
Sprinkler, maybe the sprinkler system.
And some fire protection also. That means that what they call ensuring that commercial buildings have maybe a sprinkler system in there, so that when there's a fire, people are given an opportunity to escape before the fire. If it's going to raise the facility, at least the lives are safe. And as I said earlier, we've seen weather events that are intensifying. We as Liberians, our country Liberia, should now wait until they are told that there's a tropical storm coming in with maybe 80 or 90 miles an hour wind. We should design so that should that happens, our people are secure, they have safety, they have shelter. And then plus, we have to ensure that one of the problems that Mr. Neal talked about, the flooding and all of those, we are building in areas that are called wetlands. The purpose of a wetland is that when it rains and that rain collects in area, for instance, if you build a road, a concrete pavement road, or even a quota road, or as we call them, asphalt pavement road, when it rains on it, that water can no longer drain through. So that water collects itself at the edge of the road, and it has to be drained somewhere. The purpose of what they call the wetland is to ensure that all of those water are drained safely, so that it don't go back onto the road. So if we are building in areas like those, then it becomes a problem, because soon we have flooding, and then we'll have issues that is going on in Liberia where communities are being flooded because the water have nowhere else to go. If we do follow the safe principles of designs, there are certain rules that are built into the building codes from those designs that says that, for instance, if you have maybe a 1,000 square foot house that you put up, you have to ensure that you have certain amount of vegetation around your home to be able to drain, so that when it rains for 2 or 3 or maybe 4 hours, that water does not puddle and set out. The water is able to drain out. So with those two agencies, then it's easier for us to, at this point, have some control over how we develop the rest of the way going forward for our Vision 2025. Okay.
So let me ask both of you. Mr. Neal, I know you had an opportunity to work in Liberia, and I also know that you and Mr. Puye you were the first, I think the late or the early 2000 established an engineering or consultancy firm in Liberia. There were a few of you engineers consultancy to register a Class A license in Liberia. I'm not sure how far that has come, but I know you had an opportunity to work there for a year. I know Mr. Puye went back and forth a little bit to go back and forth to see how things were going on. I've been in Liberia many times since the war, and I see people build everywhere. Is there a zoning code in respect to residential and commercial? Because here, there's certain area that you cannot build if it's resident, and if it's commercial, there's certain, to talk to our people. How does that work in Liberia?
As far as there exists a zoning code. Now, whether we follow those codes, there's a difference. And I think, people may speak different only, but residential area is set out in a certain way. It should be plot out, map out, in and outs. alleyways. Where you spoke about alleyways now that are 25 feet and that needs to be extended based on the population. Urban neighborhoods that we need to develop that would be able to secure our population to ensure that they're okay. But we speak about the global situations that's happening in Liberia with water and everything else. I was privileged enough to work through the Ministry of Lands and Mines on the pilot project for the coastal defense, and that project was developed in Liberia in 2010. It worked through the United Nations, the UNDP, and I went into Liberia. I worked with Lands and Mines. We worked in Buchanan on the coastal project where we built a 600-meter drones to be able to secure the Atlantic Street area. Now, having done that, those are things that's needed in Liberia right now to be able to help with our environmental situation. That pilot project was very successful. It have currently allowed Liberia to be able to be in line to access the GEF funding, the Global Environmental Funding, where they have access to some finances to be able to build multiple drones to be able to help the situation. The port in Buchanan have a similar situation. I believe that was the drone that's there was built by the previous company that was in Buchanan, and that structure right now is almost gone. The water has been very, very violent to that, and in turn been very violent to the people of Atlantic Street and Fishtown down there. And so there's an extension that needs to happen with the drones, in that area. We need to build drones all the way from Maryland all the way to Cape Town because our whole coastal area is having that problem. I was able to do the benchmarking when I worked with the ministry. We went to Ghana and we saw how this was actually done. So for us to be able to do the pilot project, when I say us, the Liberian government and me being a Liberian, being able to come in there and help this pilot project, come to fruitful and tangible, I think that's something we need to extend on, and we do have the ability to extend on it. I have the knowledge, the skill. There are people in Liberia that I work with, Ministry of Public Works, engineers from the hydrological services in Liberia that are very knowledgeable. So this team that we had, brought on by the minister, the current minister, Mr. Sandolo. So this team was able to make this possible, and this team needs to go back in and do more, in regards to this environmental situation that we're having here.
So a quick question, because you're speaking peer term, and we want to talk to the masses, we want to talk to the whole community, we want to talk to the 4-point-some million people Liberian. So let's speak. Let's come down and when you say groom, what that means.
T-grown is a structure used to extend into the Atlantic Ocean to build like a defense mechanism. What it is slow down the waves from coming in and eroding the land. In Ghana, we saw the drones that have been built there. They've been able to have the land recoup so much land back from the ocean. If you look at Atlantic Street, you look at D2 High School now, our complaint is D2 High School is underwater. That's the panic that's happening in Liberia right now. Hotel Africa, almost underwater. So we have when I say the ability, the knowledge, the skill set, the people that to do, that can do it right now. We need to be able to write and get our environmental fund financing that we can obtain and be able to get this project on. This is one of the projects that is not a government driven project. It's a project that we can reach out for because it's an environmental thing. It's true, through UNDP. I mean, the government has an arm to say yes, it's necessary, and the government has deemed that necessary. I mean, the president has deemed it necessary. We have people that relocating and everything else. So it's an emergency thing. So now that we have the ability to do it, that has been done, it's proven that it can be done, and we have Liberians that can do it. So now it's time for us to get it done.
So that brings me to Mr. Kuya, where you are from, what your professional opinion in that?
As far as Liberia is concerned, I think the advent of the intensity of the weather and everything is causing a lot of problems, and the sea level is going to rise. So what Liberia can do, as Mr. Neil just alluded to, is that to develop programs so that we can either you cannot control the rise of the water. But what you can do is that you can lessen the impact of the water on your beaches and on your land. You talk about even the grounds, what they call for those are like a star-shaped type of cement casted objects that is kind of placed sometime in the water, so that as the wave of the water go back and forth, it's deflected and it reduces the impact of the energy of the water as it comes towards the land. Because if it reduces the impact, it means that the center is supposed to pull it back as it's retreating back deeper into the ocean. It reduces that amount that is going to go along with it. As far as Liberia is concerned, what I think we ought to do, we ought to look at every rainy season. We ought to have, like, I think we have a environmental protection agency. They ought to go out there, when it rain the heaviest, let them mark out and see, how far did the water level come. That would then give us some numbers, and we can, what is called a floodplain, we can begin to map out what is called a floodplain. And houses that are already in those areas, you cannot really do a lot with them. But in the future, if somebody comes and say, oh, I bought a piece of land maybe in the Johnsonville area, and we know that it's in the swamp area that EPA went out there and already marked out, we can tell them, say, you cannot build there, because now we are trying to provide them education on where they can possibly build.
Because it protects our ecosystem too, which is very important, as far as our fish and eco life of Liberia, swamps, the birds, and all of those things too. So all of that is needs protection.
So, Mr. Neal, let's talk about that a little bit. I know we're all talking about development, and there are a lot of development going on in the last 6 months or the last 1 year in Liberia. Road building, street building, reservoir. And I know for a fact in this country, and now I will speak to Georgia, if you have, in last year, we literally removed a gravesite off of Central Street. And I know, been here, most of them, the both of you were educated here, and say designed the future of Georgia. So you can't just move stuff, because other people have parts to play. Like, for instance, the wildlife, things that we mark, historic places, that need to be preserved, or preservation sites. Where do you think we're going if we are changing our grave sites, we're paving a road, and then we have other wildlife that need to be preserved? What's your thought on that?
Well, I would take, for instance, me and Mr. Kevin have been privileged enough to work on a project together, us being Liberians, on the Sugarloaf Parkway here in Lawrenceville. One of the things when we're out doing our survey and our analysis, we actually ran into, there was a structure, you remember, that we ran into it, and I asked him, are we going to demolish this? And his first thing was, no, we can't do that, because I think that backs date to some historical site. And so we see that in Georgia or in the United States as a whole, those things are valued. So today, that structure is still standing there. We had to partial that piece of land on the side, even though it was bringing this road in. And we actually had to curve that road, right? We had to go around that structure, even though we needed to go through it. But because of the state, because of the value of the structure and the history of the structure, we could not do that. So when you talk about gravesite, that's a touchy subject. Okay.
I mean, from yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, from our perspective, how I see things is that Liberia as a country needs to preserve all of our resources. What do I mean by that? Our cultural resources we need to preserve, our ecological resources we need to preserve, and our historical resources we need to preserve, and archaeological resources we also need to preserve. For instance, if you have a resource such as the Patawee waterfall, for instance, and if there's a need to build a road system around that area, normally, based on both of our education and our experience working here, is that we send our specialists out there to go to do a survey. And in the survey, they will talk to people that live in the area, for instance, they want to find out from the people, well, where is the Patawi for instance? What happens there? What is the use of that? How does it relate to the people that live in the area? Because for many of us, if I have lived all my life in Monrovia and I'm in Bon County, certain things that I see that I don't see of a value to it. Someone who has lived in Bon County all their life have a different perspective. So we have an environmental protection agency. One of the things that I think they ought, if they are not already doing so, is that they need to begin to develop an environmental plan for Liberia that look at all of our different resources. We need to preserve them, because if our goal is to build a road from Monrovia to, say, Ganta, while it is good to connect us with from Monrovia to Ganta, we also have to look at the lifestyle of the people there who live with along that way that we are going to build the road. If you have a farmer who lives what they call in Banga, and all their life they depend on farming, then when we are building the road, we have to look at how much impact we are going to have on that farmers, their property. And if we can avoid it, then we have to look for a way that we can move the highway so it don't go directly in the middle of somebody's farm. So resource is highly important. We need to preserve it. We need to ensure that the EPA works to ensure that we have rules in place. We have an agency who's supposed to be to preserve our environment. So they should work on that.
Thank you, Mr. Koye. Thank you. I'm going to ask some really difficult questions. It may be difficult, but the audience like to know. I got a lot of questions. People call to find out. Here is a question. What is the risk if, because of corruption and other acts of dishonesty, our structures are not in compliance? What are the risks?
Okay, I can start off with that.
Okay.
The problem with corruption is that if we cannot, I cannot say we cannot eliminate it, but we can control it. If we do not control it, the risk that is involved is that if you have, say, a red light to Ganta project, I think it was estimated at $266 million. The government has limited resources. So that $266 million has to give us the best value possible. So if there's endemic corruption, it means that if we're supposed to get a full lane highway connecting us from red light to Ganta, but because of corruption, people will begin to pad the numbers. When the numbers get padded, that means that we end up with a 2-lane highways, and instead of having a highway, because let me take a step back, that when you design a road system, you design it based on the speed that you want your vehicles that are going to travel on the road, how they are going to travel. If it's a 60 miles an hour road, the setting, you cannot curve it into a certain distance. You will have to straighten it out. Otherwise, people, when they get into that curve, you will have a lot of accidents. You also have to look at the driving population as it is right now. Some of our drivers, let me not say many, some of our drivers are now well educated into the different signs that are on the road system. So when you take all of those into consideration, when corruption is endemic, we do not get the best value for our resources, and we have a very limited resources, because we are not going to go to look for another $266 million to come and redo the red light to Ganta Highway. When we have the next resources, we want to try to expand on the next road system. So we have to control corruption, otherwise we cannot provide us the best value for everything we want to do.
Mr. Neal?
In a line of corruption, I can speak in the line of quality.
Okay.
Now, if we fail to meet our quality standards, which is not having the right individuals in place to do the quality checks,
okay,
that's when we have problems, in my opinion. So you have a road that's supposed to meet a certain degree of flow for water. The quality assurance person do not know what that degree is. They're not educated on that, or they fail to perform that responsibility. The outcome is what you have years later, months later, of overflooding. Okay, the road does not meet the thickness that it needs to be. All the material that's being used is being, substandard. The layers are not being properly. Years to come, months to come, you have the road breaking up now. So these are the things that I will be, looking at as far as that needs to be checked, because the quality control of this stuff, if it's done properly, then we have road that has longevity, that's sustained, and maintained. And as Liberians, we've been here for a while, and now we are focusing on, I call it going back home. The journey is over. We're headed back home now. And we have to make sure that these things are built properly, so, because we are going to be using these things. So the education that we have picked up, the experience, the exposure that we have picked up, throughout the world, this is what we are trying to take back to make sure that our country is built with the quality that we have seen around the world.
We do have a question, so we'll be going to have a question shortly. If you're watching, this is Focus on Liberia, our weekly program that we talk everything Liberia. I'm your host, Yasenit Martin Peye. Your actual host is not here. He has traveled. He will be back with you next week by God's grace. But I do have with me two young Liberians. We are in the process of generational change, Mr. Mabo Franklin Neal and Mr. Save Gofan Peye. They're both engineers. One is mechanical engineer, a quality engineer. One is a civil and structural engineer. So we're trying to design Liberia for 2025. That's the vision. Thank you for watching. Shall we go to our question?
Okay, we have one question from Mr. Isaac T. Setro. What about constructing a hydro plant on the Kavala River between Liberia and the Ivory Coast?
I would say...
Can you repeat that?
Okay, this question is from Mr. Isaac T. Setro. What about constructing a hydro plant on the Kavala River between Liberia and the Ivory Coast?
We can start with the process. Let's just give a little bit of a feedback on how projects of that stature is developed. First, we have to do a feasibility study, because we want to find out whether or not the Kavala River, for instance, have enough of a flow to sustain a hydro. Because if we just look at a river and see, well, okay, it's a river, if we put a hydro on it, it's going to provide us the needed, what they call electrical supply, then we have to look at during the off-peak time, meaning the dry season when it's not raining anymore, does the river has a capacity for us to have that we can store enough water to continue what they call to provide us? Because when you build a hydro, what you're actually doing is that you are looking at an area, you look at the water, and you close out the water. You're going to provide passage for the water to go through, but you, by and large, you close out the river and then provide some passage through. And you allow the water at the back of whatever obstruction, which we call the dam you built, you allow the water to build up to certain levels. So if you are going to look at the Kavala River, for instance, you have to look at where are you going to place the dam, one. Two, the communities that are going to be around that area, that means you're going to have to, we are going to probably flood them out, because as you are building the dam, we close out the dam, the water, the reservoir area, the water level is going to build up. As the water level is building up, communities that are either south of the dam or north of the dam, most likely they are going to get flooded out. So therefore, that means you have to relocate them. And as an individual, if I went to, say, a poor society and that bush was located somewhere around where we are talking about building a dam, I will be concerned, because for me, it's a cultural resource as far as I'm concerned, because it is where I got my first education on men who know how to do things before I got the Western aspect of that. So we have to, in a feasibility study for the dam, those are some of the things that normally you will look at. I said normally because Africa as a whole, how we approach things is a little bit different. But in the normal circumstances, we'll do a feasibility study. We'll look at the flow of the river, we'll look at resources within the area, and then we'll do what is called hydraulic or hydrological modeling to find out if we dam this area, how far up high is the water going to be. The communities are going to be displaced. How many communities are going to be displaced? Then we then look at if we do so and we provide and we produce the electricity from the hydro dam, the cost of it, don't do what is called now the cost benefit analysis. We look at the resources that we're about to destroy versus the benefits that we're going to derive from this project. And then plus, do we have money to do it is the next thing. So we'll take all of a mix of all of those things and see what works best for us.
So let me ask a quick question, just to add to Mr. because you talk about the resources, the money, if we have the money to build it. Now, majority of the time we beg or we say a donor, and the money we're getting from World Bank is not free. We have to pay that back, correct?
Yes.
Now, does that restrict us from doing a lot more things, or does that give us leeway? How does that help, or how does that restrict us?
Now, I don't know how the contracts are written in regards to that. But one of the things I could see if I was at the table is, the caller spoke about building a hydro on the Kavala. How about we going cleaner? There's wind energy, there's solar energy that we can use.
Oh, wow.
Those are all form of electricity generating mechanism that we can use. I mean, those are clean energy. They provide work, long-time work for people. So there are a lot of, we have options. In regards to the financing, that's totally different. I don't speak about the money part. I'm the technical guy. If they bring the money, the material, and everything else, and say, do this, we want this done by so and so time, managing it and getting it to work, that's what I do. I bring it to life. I bring visions to life. And one of the visions of Liberian people is to have electricity throughout the country.
Right.
Is to have a good form of life. It's for us to leap forward, from where we've been, and that to encompass from the oceans to the last border town in Ivory Coast, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, on all sizes. That we will improve life for every one of us, regardless.
And if I may add to what Mr. Neil just said, and let me just also take a step back, is that when the Ellen Johnson government came into being, Liberia were already in debt. We have billions of dollars in debt. Mm-hmm. As part of the process of helping Liberia get a clear footing, a new start, we went through what was called the HIPIC process. The HIPIC process is where we look at the different entities that generated revenues. We look at our debt. We look at how they spent money. So based on that, all of those who are loaned us money, who we owe before, they were able to forgive our debt. In return for forgiving our debt, now there's a limit on how much we can borrow. So if we are looking at a capital-intensive project such as a dam, for instance, that means that we will have to either borrow the money but do it in sequence over years. If we cannot do it in sequence over years, then our optimal route to go would be maybe a public-private partnership where we talk to some partner to come in and say, well, we want to have in the southeastern sector, for instance, we need to have electricity grid in the system. But if you can come in and establish that, in return for establishing that, we'll give you a certain amount of years that you can go ahead and recoup all of your investment in putting up the infrastructure for that. Okay. So that's going to be one of the better ways that Liberia going forward can do any kind of capital projects.
Okay. And I'm going to veer off a little bit, but it's also about money, because building requires money. Now, again, it's political season in Liberia. Mount Ellen Justice generational change. I'm all for it, but we have to make the most of it. Now, let me ask this. One of the candidates has stated that in the last debate, or the first debate, that he's able to grow the Liberia economy or budget to $1 billion. There have been debate about that. I know Mr. Kwege also has an MBA. You're a project manager, so your job is also to make do. The design certainly give it to you to make do. So, if you both think this is possible, how is that possible?
To increase the revenue coming in?
Yes.
at a bit up to $1 billion.
We right now have a 600,000,
That's
600
the
million.
budget to pay out to keep the country running, right?
Yeah.
The revenue would be what would be collected. Wow.
I think I'm of the opinion that it is possible.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think it is possible. The reason why I think it is possible is that Liberia, as Liberia is right now, Liberia is the size comparatively to, say, the state of Tennessee, which is just north of Georgia. And the economy of Tennessee at this point is almost between $6 and $10 billion.
Oh, wow.
So it is possible. But what has to happen is that up to this point, the primary employer in the country has been the government. The government will have to do some investment to ensure that there is growth in the private sector. If there's growth in the private sector, Mr. Neal and myself here, we had a consulting firm. The consulting firm is able to contract with the government. The government don't have to do the work. They can oversee the work. We can come in a contract to do the work, hire Liberians. I'm a trained engineer. He's a trained engineer. We can hire Liberians and bring the Liberians in, because if I hire Liberians and I'm working with them and they are being paid a reasonable wage for that matter, an income for that matter, it means that they can sustain their family. They are able to send their kids to school. And there's a multiplier effect also. If I hire one engineer to work for me, it means that you have maybe 5 or 10 people who are dependent on him, who too will benefit from that. So now that our engineer has an income coming from our consultancy, he is able to go into the market, buy food and stuff, and then the marketer or the farmer who had a farm all the way out there is able to come and sell, so that the money is able to circulate. But as it is right now, it's mostly just the government with the employees, and the money is being kept to a point where all of our resources that could be circulated to grow the economy is not working. So in conclusion, right now we're spending so much of our resources on recurring expenditure, and we need to move away from that.
Again, thank you for watching Focus on Liberia, where everything we talk about is Liberia, where our concern is Liberia. I'm your host, Yassini Martin, sitting in for Mr. Dennis Cha. With me is Mr. Mabu Neal and Mr. Sey Weye. They're both engineers and they're both Liberian and American trained. Thank you for watching. We will go to a commercial and we'll be right back.
bamusa. Tiolele don't take all de la bamusa. Ate. God knows something. Ate. Wemu. Bado wemu. Yeah, you make it fun. Yeah, you make it look sexy. Yeah, you make it fun. Liberian girl, you're not supposed to pick it up. Liberian girl, never you're supposed to pay. Ooh, now you can make a papa. Now you can make a papa look sexy. Now you can make a papa. Now you can make a papa look sexy. Bado, Musa.
Welcome back to Focus on Liberia, our weekly program where we discuss everything Liberia. We have two young Liberians with us today. We are painting a picture of Liberia in the year 2020. What do we look forward to? What do we hope for? So we call it Vision 2025 Re-Engineering Liberia. I have with me Mr. Mabu Franklin Neal and Mr. Save Gufan Faye. They're both engineers. One is a mechanical engineer and quality engineer. One is a civil and structural engineer. They do have business in Liberia. They have worked in Liberia. And they go back and forth to Liberia. They're very interested in what is going to happen, where we go from here after the election. So for those of you that are watching, if you have any questions, please call us. The number is on the screen or on our Facebook page. And we want to say thank you for watching, and we want to say thank you for them being here to talk to us, to help us redesign our country for the future and for our children or for posterity. Now, thank you again for watching. Mr. Neal, I will come to you first. I was cool preparing engineers for the future because I see that most of the projects that are taking place in Liberia are foreigners that are heading them, Chinese, even our businesses, people that are importing, Lebanese. Are we preparing for the next generation to empower young Liberians? And if we are preparing, then where and when and how do we start preparing them? Another thing is not simply talking about studying, at the elementary level or graduate level. Where do we start from and how do we do that? And how do we encourage those of you who are already in that field to be able to help out in the country? And how do we keep the cycle going and grow more engineers? Because at the university level, we look at graduates. It's mostly political, public administration, business management, where we call it cashier and job, and finance and all of these things. But the medical, the engineer, where do we start from? What is your advice to our country?
I mean, advice to our country right now is each one teach one. It's where we, individuals that have traveled and have the exposure, the education, the means to be able to teach our, young Liberians of what we have learned to be able to get them to the next level. I think in 2006, 2007 in the U.S., they did an evaluation of how many engineers were graduating in the U.S. versus China and India. And based on that, they found that those countries were graduating more engineers and professionals than the U.S. was, and they launched a plan where they could reach back and be in the numbers as far as development. And this is what Liberia needs to do. Look at Sierra Leone, Ghana, Guinea, and the other countries right around there. Their students coming out of school, what level are they on versus us? We 150 something years, we've been in existence. At this time, we need to be, jumping that next step. We've had our faults with the war, but the next step is to be way more advanced. And that's where we come into play. That's, people like me reaching back and mentoring other people on the ground. Like I said, I'm in Liberia anywhere once to 2 times a year. Mm-hmm. And if there was a mentorship program that I could work through dealing with engineers. At least every 6 months, I can say, well, I'm going back. I'm working with these engineers. They're, Liberia has internet and everything else. Now we have corresponding. Well, if they need to troubleshoot something, they can always refer it to me. I can evaluate it, send it back to them. And I think the same thing with my brother here. And that's what we need, that mentorship program, because as for me, in 36 months, I plan to be living in Liberia. So what I'm doing right now as far as working with Liberia is the development of where I'm going to stay. That's my retirement. I never liked living in the U.S. This was just a temporary stay for me. So I'm ready to be back home.
Great. So, Mr. P, what is your stand on there? Are we preparing engineers for the future? I'm not simply talking about just studying engineering at a graduate level or undergrad level, but I'm talking about preparation. For instance, I have a daughter, she's 10-year-old, she's in sciences. So she has a team that she's on, they call Einstein. So she's in STEM. They have teachers that just focus on them. Certain time of the day, they take them from their class, and a group of them go to that particular class. So they're preparing them for the future. Where do you think should we start? And if we should start, how do we start? What is required for us to start?
That STEM program was actually developed from when they did the evaluation. That the U.S. was graduating less engineers than that's where that STEM program came.
Great.
And that's where we need to create our STEM program right now.
And he's right. From my perspective, what I think should happen is that at this point in time is that all of our youth, we have to start to develop some STEM program in schools, not just the public schools, but also the private schools. For those of you who do not know, STEM is just an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Those subject matters are kind of introduced to children at a younger age so that they are comfortable with it, so that when they get to high school, many of them can develop an interest in it. And from my perspective, one of the things that I have done is that whenever I travel to Liberia, I go to the University of Liberia and ask the instructors, particularly those in the engineering school, go in there and ask to give me a time just to talk to the students, give them a perspective. For instance, I try to pique their interest or whet their appetite by talking about project management. How do you start a road project? The processes that is involved in it as we go through that in the U.S. And my hope is that when I give those lecture, it will keep them grounded in the program, because many of them at the end of my lecture, they'll come back and tell me that, their family have been encouraging them to go into business, because at this point in time, that's the best way that they can have access to resources. But I'm able to convince them with the lectures and everything that, they have a brighter future if they stay in the engineering field, because everything, everything that's going to be developed in Liberia is highly dependent on them. And I also go to the extent that even the Ministry of Public Works, the 2 times that I was there, at one time I went and I gave the lectures to the engineers, the administrative engineers who were at Public Works, to give them an idea, for instance, how we look at projects, how do we do feasibility study from our perspective. Because for me, I've been blessed to work for at least 3 different agencies in 3 different states. I work in New York, I work in Minnesota, and I currently work in Georgia. So I'm able to give them a different perspective from the different agencies, how they handle projects. And I believe by so doing, I'm giving them a new insight so that when they go out there, they have a new perspective, not just look at, okay, put a quota down from point A to point B, but look at the impact of putting that quota down is going to have on the community.
Thank you so much. I think we need to look at some of these topics and talk about it more in the future. So another question really quickly. Mr. Neil, what's your thought on the Mount Coffee hydro? Do you think we got the best possible price to capacity? Because I know other countries next to us, they almost the same or more, and they got a better deal. So those are you guys' area, your area, Mr. Neil.
The deal and the time maybe is what, the discrepancy is. Maybe when we struck our deal, our hands were tied with the golden handcuff, versus when Guinea struck their deal and they maybe got a little bit more bang for their buck. But we're still not behind. There are multiple things Liberia can do. Liberia have an option with solar. wind technology, and these are the other things that they can be evaluating. I mean, we have the opportunity to put multiple smaller manufacturing of electricity in areas that can really get our country up to speed. So I think our opportunities are still there to increase our grid.
And I get that. While the opportunities are there, okay, because the thing is we have limited resources. And it's also good to have people, and I think some of our problems have been putting people in the wrong positions in respect to disciplines, because you can best negotiate if you understand what you are negotiating, as to somebody just giving you information or you being the front person. So, and that's what the question is about. Somebody actually asked this question, and I wanted to add it to that. Mr. Okoye, what's your thought process on that?
I would just say, if we're going to be frank and honest, that we did not get the best bang for our money at this point. The reason I'm saying that is that when the Moncoffee Hydro, when it comes online fully, is going to produce 88 megahertz of what they call of electricity. The last cost that I saw, the total cost of the project was well over $300 million. So if you are using, for a country that have limited resources, if you use $300 million plus of your money on just 88 megawatts, it does not work. Because I've done studies with Rwanda when I was in grad school, for instance. I did studies with Kenya to look at the IT system, the electrical system, the energy system, for instance, how in terms of cost-benefit ratios, how were they doing it? And I look at the numbers in Liberia, I said we did not get that. But going forward, I mean, it's a lesson learned. We can learn from our mistakes. We can learn from, whatever constraints that we have, so that in the future we are able to do better.
So, last question, and then I would like your closing statement. Then, the election is coming up. We got the voter registration. We have the numbers. The numbers at this point does not add up. The registration number that we have in Liberia is different from what the CIA website says. I mean, you may not be a politician. Let me not assume you're an engineer, you're a technocrat. That's fine. But realistically, we're all politicians by nature because we all negotiate. What's your stand on that? Do you have any insight on that? Because there's some sort of imbalancing going on. Because the CIA are telling us that the people who are responsible to vote in Liberia do not reach this amount, but the Liberian, the election commission is telling us this amount of people register. How is that possible?
I think when we look at election in Liberia, my main focus is one at this time that we have peace.
Okay.
Regardless who becomes the president, we must maintain our peace and look forward to developing our country.
Okay.
Because that is the most important thing. We must accept what comes out of the election. And if we disagree with it, we have 6 years of whoever is the president. We have 6 years of the opportunity to tell us or to help us get to where we need to be. And then we move forward. You know, the president had the agenda for transformation, the different pillars. She has had 12 years to work on those pillars. And when you look at pillars and development, you have foundation. I think she's done okay with the foundation. She's done well with the foundation. Now somebody else needs to take one of the pillars and run with it.
Okay.
So if this election should take place and one president or whoever becomes the president take one pillar and do well with that pillar, the next president can do well, the next president can do well. I mean, our development is not going to take, overnight. It's going to take time. And each of us must be fully invested in that time that it's going to take to make this country a great country.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Mr. Okoye, what's your thought on that? Shortly, please.
As far as the data is concerned, that there are two schools of thoughts on that if you correlate, for instance, the projected population of Liberia based on the CIA estimate that says that Liberia has an estimated population of 4.4 million people. And then you look at the different demographics of that population. In this case, you look at the under 18 population, 18 plus to maybe 35 population, and do that. If you overlay that with whatever the election commission is saying, the numbers seems kind of iffy. Let me put it that way. But ultimately, we are gearing and working towards election. We hope that we have a successful election, that there won't be a lot of contentions in it, so that the next 6 years, whoever is going to be ushered in as a leader can work towards lifting the country and moving the country forward from where the current president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, have worked and brought it forward from.
Thank you so much. So in the 30 seconds, Mr. Neil, pin out your vision on Liberia in 2025, and the same for you, Mr. Peye.
In 2025, I believe our next president, just like a track meet, should be able to take that baton and run with it. Whatever happened in the past, you move forward. Don't look back. That's how I feel. Make something happen that we can say, yes, this president did this, and we're happy for it. Then the next person, and the next person, and the next person. And we got to keep developing. Liberia is for all of us, I keep saying. And we have to keep developing. We that are in the diaspora and those that are on the ground, we are all one. Liberia is for all of us.
Mr. Peye, pin out of your vision, the picture of what Liberia should look like.
In 2025, my hope and aspiration is that we have a Liberia that have been segmented to at least 5 regions, and each region has a level 1 trauma center, or the size and status as JFK. That's one. So that people don't have to leave from, say, Sano and have to go all the way to JFG Hospital in Tapeta. My hope is that out of the cities, I think they have the local government act right now is on a debate that when it comes online, that we will go back and re-demarcate the cities. And all of those cities will be linked by at least a 2-lane road system, a paved system, an all-weather road system. We'll have high schools in all of the county capitals. We'll have at least a junior college so that people don't have to all travel to Monrovia to University of Liberia. So it is my hope that all of our literacy rate will increase to around maybe 70 or 80% within the next 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Focus on Liberia. I'm your host today, Mrs. Yasendi Martin. Here is my vision in closure. Thank Liberia, love Liberia. Liberia deserves better. We hope whoever is the president remember that we deserve better, that we put Liberians first, Liberian businesses first, Liberians' children first. The future belongs to us. Good day, and thank you for watching.